Now, Channel 3 and CT Insider present a CT'22 primetime special, The Race for Governor, a conversation with the candidates.
Welcome back to the special prime time Thursday edition of CT'22, brought to you in partnership with CT Insider. We just wrapped up our conversation with Republican gubernatorial candidate Bob Stefanowski. Now it's Governor Ned Lamont's turn to tackle our panel's questions. On the panel, Channel 3's chief political reporter Susan Raff and Dan Haar, columnist and associate editor with CT Insider and the Hearst, Connecticut newspapers. Governor, thanks for being with us.
Nice to see you, Eric. Hey, you guys.
Want to start with this. There was a lot of questions over time. Are you going to run again? Are you going to run again? Was there a moment in your first term when you said, yes, I need to run again, and this is why?
I think during the worst of COVID, when I felt like the state was performing pretty well. I felt like I was making a difference, working with an incredible team. I think we got through COVID better than most and got our economy back on track. And I just figured we're off to a good start, but we got a long way to go. I'm old, but I'm not that old, so I think I'll give it another go.
We have, just as we did with your challenger, we have a number of topics. We're going to move between Dan and Susan for the questioning. Our first topic is inflation and the economy, and Susan has the first question.
Governor, it's certainly everything, or what everyone is talking about these days, inflation and the economy. And while those high prices are not necessarily unique to Connecticut, it is hurting Connecticut taxpayers and families. If you are lucky to get reelected, what would your plans be going forward to make our state more affordable?
Well, I can't deal with worldwide inflation, but I can make it more easy for our residents. And so what we've done so far is we've put in place the biggest middle-class tax cut in history, about $650 million. I wanted a lot of that to drop, last summer, this fall. I want it to come now, not wait till April 15th next year. Just give everybody a little bit extra so they can get through a tough time. We're the third state in the country to do the gas tax cut. I think that made a difference. We have some of the lower gas prices in the country. What we do going forward, I think, build on what we've done. Working with our federal delegation, we're capping pharmaceutical prices, expansion of Access Health, which is the exchange. These are ways that we can bring down health care costs. We've really worked hard to make education more affordable because that's the elevator for everybody, lifts folks up. So debt-free community college. And for those of you who don't want to go to college for 2 years or 4 years, we've got a program where for 18 weeks, 24 weeks, you can get a certificate as a laser welder and get a job earning $70,000 a year on an electric boat. So we have a lot of options for people, help you get back in the workforce, earn a little bit more, and keep a little bit more of what you earn.
Dan?
Good. Okay. Well, that leads into our second question, which is, the data all shows that Connecticut is growing slowly. It's not a gangbusters boom, but not in recession yet. The emphasis on yet. But our polls showed that most people, even a plurality of Democrats, think that Connecticut is moving backwards in the economy. How do you assess the Connecticut economy right now?
Oh, I don't agree with that. I mean, as you know, Dan, because you study this, we hadn't added a new job in the previous 30 or 40 years. We were flat as a pancake, legacy businesses sort of leaning on our reputation. And now we have over 100,000 jobs I've got to fill. That's because our economy, in terms of these jobs, is growing, and it's everything from advanced manufacturing to nurses to teachers to IT, information technology, maybe even TV journalists. I'm not sure. So I think that's a sign we have an economy that's growing. We have a very low unemployment rate. That's good. I think the malaise is that ongoing worldwide inflation, what that does to people's outlook.
Likelihood, just quickly, likelihood of recession?
I think it's very likely, which is why I don't, unlike my two opponents, I don't want to spend away the rainy day fund. That rainy day fund is there for a moment like this. If our revenues start going down, I don't want to have to raise taxes. I don't want to have to cut education spending. That's why we have a rainy day fund.
You've pointed out that, growth has rebounded some in your administration, but you've also pointed out that over the past couple of decades, economic growth has really lagged, certainly behind other states. What else, other than job training and workforce training, can you do to increase Connecticut's productivity and confidence? Businesses, as you heard from the CBIA, when you spoke, they're very concerned about taxes on businesses, and they don't feel that this is necessarily a friendly climate for businesses.
I don't know about that. I think I come out of the business world, first guy in this job out of the business world. First thing I had to do was we were looking at $2 billion budget deficits as far as I could see. Balance that without raising income taxes, which is what 4 or 5 of my predecessors had done. I think that gave the business community some confidence that we're getting our fiscal house in order. And more importantly, I think for the business community, they want some certainty. This is not just a budget built for this year, but we've had 4 balanced budgets in a row. Now we're talking about a surplus and how we invest that. I think that's important. But so the other thing is we've got to refresh our legacy businesses. You know, you had old finance down there in Stamford, greater area there, you know, UBS, and the building was emptied out. And now we have some of the leading digital currency groups and fintech companies in the world moving there. You know, New Haven is extraordinary. Remember we were worried that Alexion was going to move, everybody's going to go to Boston, last one out, turn out the lights. We've got dozens of new life science and healthcare startups going on in the greater New Haven area. And finally, manufacturing is still our anchor tenant, and that is growing. So I feel very good about where we are as an economy and joining the 21st century.
You mentioned taxes in some of your answer to the last question, and that's our next topic. And Dan has the first question on taxes and state spending. Yeah,
Governor Bob Stefanowski, your opponent, continues to say that you raised taxes by $2 billion in your first year in office, 2019. You did raise taxes. I know you don't believe it is that much. How much do you believe you actually raised taxes by, and how do you respond when people say, I've seen an ad that says you raised taxes by $2 billion?
I refer him to Dan Har's article of about 2 weeks ago where he said that $2 billion is a made-up number. Stop it. You probably said, I think you said maybe $340 million, and that doesn't take into effect the tax cuts we put in at the same time.
Well, but it doesn't include the paid family and medical leave, which is another $400 million. But do you see this as dogging you, this $2 billion figure?
No, I don't think so. It's a made-up number, and I need journalists like you to say, show me the money, because it's just a false number, and I think you pointed that out. I think people more formally say, hey, I didn't see my income tax go up. I didn't see my sales tax go up. I like the fact that we're working within the guardrails set up, and I think that gives me some confidence we're getting our house together.
Mm-hmm. You've mentioned here that your administration and your leadership, you've passed what some are considering record tax cuts, right? $650 million, and we're fortunate to have a surplus. If you remember, years past we haven't been so fortunate. Your opponent, Bob Stefanowski, wants to use $2 billion of that $6 billion surplus to help people during this very difficult time with either gas or home heating oil. What's wrong with that?
He wants to go back to just what all my predecessors did. Okay, we've got a rainy day fund. Let's spend it down now. Let's hand out some tax goodies now, right before an election. Let's hope we don't have a recession, and we'll be able to deal with that later. I think that's the exact wrong thing to do. As you point out, we've made significant investments in terms of helping people get back to work, including expansion of daycare and K-12 education spending. We've got a tax cut in place that went into effect. I didn't get any Republican support for that, but I think it was the right thing to do. But I think it's the wrong thing to spend away all the money right now that we've saved up just when, as Dan says, we're probably looking at a recession.
Want to go small ball here, very small ball. The diesel tax increase amounts to, what, $20 or $22 million a year. So for that 1/1000th of the state budget, that you presumably could have halted, although it was in legislation that it goes up automatically on July 1st of this past summer. You're blamed for the Chicago fire, the Lindbergh baby, and everything else. Do you regret that? It's become such an issue. Would you like to go back and say, all right, let's undo that increase? Likewise, the gas tax, December 1st. Would you like to extend that tax break until the spring?
Look, I'd like to extend all these things. I do have to pay the bills, Dan. And as you remember, when I took over, there was no reserves in that special transportation fund. And the feds were saying, probably not going to give you any more money until you get your act together. So it's easy for the other team to say, I'll eliminate all transportation-related taxes like diesel and gas for the next year or so. We'll figure out how to pay for it later. That's not the way I do business. I'm going to take a hard look, though, at the gas tax. I think it's been giving people some real immediate relief. And if I can extend that a little bit longer, I'd like to do it. But I got to do that within a balanced budget.
But not the diesel and not the over-the-road big truck tax?
I don't think so. that tax on the big tractor trailer trucks, a lot of them are just coming through the state. That raises us, say, $80, $90 million. I think they should pay into this. A lot of them are from out of state. That allows me to have free bus service for all of our cities. It gives me some flexibility.
Isn't there some concern, though, that that cost just gets passed on to the end consumer? And like you said, you can't control what happens outside our borders, but might that be one little way?
So does putting everything on a credit card, Eric, and saying, let's let the next generation pay for it, which is what this state has done for a long time. I'm not going to let that happen. And I don't think so. Look, when that orange comes up from Florida, it goes through 50 different toll booths and 5 highway user fees. Then it comes to Connecticut, and it's almost a free pass. So I think that's a straw man.
Dan was talking about the question of tax increases dogging you in commercials. Another thing we hear from your opponent is about crime. Susan has the first question on our next topic.
Crime is an issue for many people in many communities, right? And we're certainly hearing a lot about that on the campaign trail. Some data did come out, and preface that with during the pandemic, we did see an increase in crime. And those numbers have come down. The data that came out of the state police showed that violent crimes, property crimes, those are down. But rape has increased, and Hartford is on track to be probably one of the worst years ever, or in a very long time, for homicides. That's the capital city. You know, how do you want people to come to Connecticut's capital city when, you know, when crime is that bad and people are afraid of that? And also in our own communities, as we continue to see catalytic converters, stolen cars, home invasions. Can you address some of that?
Well, first of all, rape is up compared to last year when there was a lot of people who were sheltering in place. It's the second lowest in the last decade, and all of our crime is much lower than 80s and 90s when I was growing up. I think we have one of the great police forces in the world right here in Connecticut. We have one of the lowest crime rates, you know, in the country right here in Connecticut. So I don't need a lot of scaremongering, but nor am I putting the mission accomplished sign up on the aircraft carrier. We got to do better. So what do? You know, number one, first year I got in office, I said we're going to start hiring additional classes of state police, and we've done that. We've got more police in training or on the ground now in our municipal police than ever before. We got to do better there. And on a personal note, I've also wanted to make sure our police is the most diverse team of police we've ever had. So people in the community see a policeman, they say, this is somebody like me, this is somebody who I know is on my team trying to keep me safe. So I take nothing for granted. I know we have a long way to go, but all that carnage in the streets and fear-mongering I think is unnecessary. We got great police, and they're doing a really good job.
State police and the union had a vote of no confidence against you or about your leadership. There's a general malaise among police officers. We talk to them. We hear about it, possibly stemming from the 2020 reform. Is there a trust that you need to rebuild, something between you and first responders, police officers? Is there a change that you would do in the 2020 reform? I know there was some in 2021 as well. Is there more that you would do? What are you looking at there?
Well, look, there's always union issues, so that does impact some of these things. But look, we just swore in another class of state police. I think that's extraordinary. I remember, look, we got a bipartisan crime bill. That was a big deal. Got us more judges, more information in terms of they can know if it's a repeat offender or a first-time offender. We did do police accountability bill. That was soon after the George Floyd thing. But I think some of the anxiety about that's going to be a little like what it was, Dan, when we said people are going to have body cams. And people said, oh, my God, you don't trust me. People are going to be looking over my shoulder. I think now, 2 and 3 years later, the police I talk to, and I talk to a lot of cops every day, is thank you. The body cam says I'm doing a good job, and it reminds everybody every day. That horrible, you know, killing of the 2 cops in Bristol. Did you see that body cam video?
I didn't see it.
Well,
I didn't
it
watch
would tell you these guys are heroes.
Yeah.
And extraordinary what they did. And overnight, you know, we had the Inspector General say they did the right thing.
And some would feel, though, that, you know, eliminating or limiting qualified immunity has made cops feel very unsafe. We talked to Bob Stefanowski about the ad that he's now running with a family and a wife of a Farmington police officer who feels that that eroded the respect level, and people feel that they can mow down police officers.
I think there's a lot of fear-mongering on that. There are a lot of personal injury attorneys who are stirring things up. How many cases have been brought under the qualified immunity in the last year and a half? 0. And that's because it's a very high bar, and that just reminds people that our cops do the right thing every day.
But is there something personal because you're the governor and because you know about this malaise, you know about this anger out there, is there something you feel you could do, either in the bill or personally reaching out more? I don't know. Something that you can do to sort of rebuild some trust. There's a lot of anger.
Well, I'm not sure about that, but I think everything starts with respect. Mm-hmm. And I think our state police and municipal police have got to believe that I'm there for them. I believe in what they're doing. I stand up for what they're doing. I know that public safety is my number 1, 2, and 3 responsibility. They're right on the front lines. Bristol reminds us every day that these are cops responding to a 911 call. It's not a cat in a tree. It could be some drunk with an AR-15 ready to ambush you. These are what our men and women in the police force do, and I think they know I respect them every day for what they do. I couldn't do it without you.
Good.
We're going to leave crime right there and move on to our next topic, reproductive rights. And Susan has the first question.
Governor, you've been clear from day one that you support a woman's right to choose, and now states are grappling with that decision. And some feel that having states decide this very, very personal issue is the right way to go. Do you agree with that? And what else needs to be done in Connecticut? Connecticut has codified that right to protect a woman's right. What else should be done?
Well, I don't agree with a word of that Supreme Court decision. Say that is a basic right, but let's leave it up to the states to decide whether women have that reproductive choice or not. I think it's a gross expansion of government overreach. I think it's the wrong thing. I really hope we send people to Congress that make Roe v. Wade the law of the land again. In the meantime, Sue, you got to rely upon your governors and legislatures. And I think you know where Susan Beiswitz and I stand. As you said, from day one, we stood very tall on that. I think that makes a difference, and people know it. And you got to worry what happens next. Another governor, another legislature. I'm generally in favor of choice, but if somebody challenges it or I want to see some restrictions, I think I'll do it. You got to worry about that.
And women are coming here already from other states, right? Texas and other states, and our legislation protects them. But does it? I mean, does it protect these women and medical staff from performing abortion on women who come from other states?
Yes. I mean, we put in place a safe harbor bill. Matt Blumenthal took the lead on that. Power to you. And it says if Texas wants to come up and sue that woman or sue that doctor who came to Connecticut for their full reproductive choice, we're not going to participate in that. We'll protect you. I think that's a good thing to do, and I'm glad I signed that bill.
Dan?
I think Bob Stefanowski was as strong on choice as I've heard him in this past segment. But what about parental rights? Parental notification, I'm sorry, that's where you differ. 36 states do have a parental notification bill when a minor who's pregnant wants an abortion. That includes Rhode Island and Massachusetts. Some of the bills are pretty leaky. There are a lot of exceptions. Do you see that as an untouchable, or would you compromise and go for something like that? I know you're against it.
You know, the first part of your question was Bob is acting more pro-choice than he was before, comma, and now he's looking for some restrictions like the one you just mentioned. I think it's a solution looking for a problem. You go to Planned Parenthood, Dan, you know, 98% of those girls come in with a mother, come in with a parent, come in with a family member. And those 2 or 3% that don't, I'm afraid, have a really challenging reason why they don't feel comfortable doing that. And we make sure they get counseling. We make sure they get support. Don't make her go for a judge and answer this stuff. I think it's working pretty well. I thought Roe v. Wade was working pretty well. That was 50 years of established law.
Right. On to our next topic. We're going to stick with Dan. We're talking leadership and criticism from your opponent.
Yeah, Bob Stefanowski, again, you're having to answer a lot of things he says. That's the nature of these things. He brings up the state pier. He brings up West Haven. He brings up the SEMA 4. He brings up the school construction investigation. He brings up most recently the $54 million income that you reported. When asked what that means to him in the plethora, what is he saying? His answer is he feels that you are absent or an absentee, not at the wheel. And so I wanted to have you respond to that and also answer as to whether, when you see some of the conservative rallies like the one in Fairfield where you were at, what they're saying is we feel unheard by the governor. How do you respond to that criticism? Absent, unheard. It doesn't look that way to me because I'm here every day, but that's what we see.
I think we got 2 weeks before a campaign and the beginning to throw a lot of mud or continuing to throw a lot of mud. I think it's a cheap shot. I think you guys know I've been out there every day answering questions. During the worst of COVID, every afternoon I took every question I could, tell people why I'm asking you to do what I'm trying to get you to do, and explain my thinking. I couldn't do it with a heavy hand. I couldn't do it with requirements, but I could try and lead by telling you the best of my thoughts on this stuff. You know, these other attacks, we can go one by one, but I think they're cheap shots. Look, I started up a good business. I run against somebody who had a payday lending business. Now he's earning $1 million a month from the Saudis. So I can go back and forth on this. Let's focus on what the people of Connecticut want to talk about.
I want to follow up with that, and you've put that out on the table, the paycheck or the payday loans, and Saudi Arabia. Those are, you know, a lot of shots are taken in advertising, right, on both sides. You know, we heard the payday loan issue back when Stefanowski ran for governor the first time. You know, and I understand that predatory or lending of that rate, that's not allowed in Connecticut. But is that still a relevant issue? Saudi Arabia, okay, a lot of companies do business in Saudi Arabia, and he's part of it's a biofuel, biotechnology company that could create clean energy.
A lot of businesses do business in Saudi Arabia. A lot of finance guys take money from Saudi Arabia. But when you are running for public office, at the same time that you're collecting, you know, millions of dollars a year from the Saudis for doing God knows what. I can see why you wanted to keep that a secret, did not want you to know about it. It just leads to a lot of questions about judgment and, frankly, conflicts of interest. But let's talk about Connecticut.
Do you think that he should have divulged that Saudi Arabia client prior?
Absolutely. Oh, yes. I mean, they're buying some influence. I don't know what it is. I mean, you're standing next to gasoline pumps, decrying the high price of gasoline. At the same time, you're getting $1 million a month. I think people want to know, and I can see why I didn't want people to know.
Our next topic is education and COVID relating to education. Susan, your question.
I think the pandemic was very difficult for schools all across our state, all across our country. And you've prided yourself on saying, you know, Connecticut was able to open schools faster than many or most states. But the issue really remains for remote learning. I mean, a lot of students were left behind. They didn't follow their curriculum. They were really isolated. And we're seeing an achievement gap now. How do you fix that? How do you bring students back into the classroom, not just being there physically, but also academically and mentally challenged?
So after our schools, COVID closed our schools more than that first 3 or 4 months, I immediately said, Sue, let's make up for the learning loss. Let's get to STEM. Let's get these guys ready to go. That was the summer of 2020. Realized pretty quick that these kids needed a lot more support than that, than just STEM learning. And that's why we had our summer learning camps, just a shoulder to lean on, have a little fun, socializing. And that first year, we were one of the few states to get almost all of our schools open for in-person learning in that summer of 2020 or fall of 2020. And this last year was much better. People are much more at ease, much more ready to learn. But to your bigger point, there was a lot of learning loss there. And some kids, you know, hey, I'm doing fine, I can Zoom, this is great. But a lot of kids, there was nothing for them. And there we got to have special tutorial sessions to help them catch up, maybe some other summer programs to help them catch up. I can't afford to leave them behind. Especially, look, I got 100,000 jobs we can't fill. This is the time to make sure they're all educated with the skills they need to be able to take advantage of this unique time.
We also saw a lot of pushback for masks and vaccines during the pandemic. The mask restrictions have eased, mainly because the pandemic seems to be better. What about vaccine mandates for children in schools? Will you push for that?
No, I didn't during the worst of COVID. I'm certainly not going to do it now. And I think more importantly, people have the ability to keep themselves safe. It's more like the flu. And so if you feel you're living with a grandmother, she's got respiratory, you can wear a mask. I urge everybody, get vaccinated. And we're a little slow about getting vaccinated now. You know, we're all pepped up and then we're not. We get distracted. And this is a perfect time for you to get the flu vaccine and the COVID vaccine. I just did the same.
I just want to hear if you can say strongly that you will not, even if CDC recommends it, either support legislation or executive order that says children will be vaccinated.
Yeah, CDC recommended it, and I recommend it too, but I'm not mandating it.
Right.
We have time for just one last question. Dan, it's on the voters that the governor needs.
Yes. You know, both sides seem to be looking at cities A, there's a lot of people, and B, that's been a big Democratic stronghold. Are you comfortable that you've done enough? Bob Stefanowski is in the cities, especially New Haven, and all the cities, really. Are you comfortable that you've done enough to hold your lead in the polls through Election Day in the cities?
I guess we'll find out on November 8th, won't we? I'm not going to... what I want people to believe is that the state is turning a corner, that we went through a pretty tough, 10 years, 30 years. We saw the deficits. We saw the lack of job creation. Today we're talking about surpluses. Today we're talking about the jobs we can fill. And that means I want those filled with any kid, regardless of race, color, creed, zip code. I'm going to make sure they get that opportunity. It's a once in a lifetime where we have so many jobs going unfilled right now. So that doesn't mean cities. That doesn't mean small towns. That means everybody, and that's who I'm for.
Governor, we only have about a minute left, and I want to give you the same opportunity I gave Mr. Stefanowski. Make a final pitch to voters. Here we are, this close to Election Day. If you want them to say, this is why I deserve another term, what's your pitch to voters?
I'd say democracy is not a spectator sport. Get involved. I need you involved. If you believe the state is making progress, I know my opponents are always bad-mouthing the state of Connecticut. I'm not. I'm a champion for the state. That's why I ran the first time. That's why I'm running again. I think we're beginning to get our fiscal house in order. That makes a big deal. I think we are one of the safest states in the country. We still have a way to go, and I continue to do that. I'm going to make sure we have job opportunity for everybody, regardless of background. That's what our future is. And by the way, for the first time in a long time, we got the resources to speed up our rails, speed up our commutes, make a difference there. We're an old state with a lot of old infrastructure. We're just getting started.
All right. Governor Ned Lamont, thank you for being with us here on this special primetime edition of CT'22. Dan Haar, Susan Rauth, thank you as well.
Thanks, guys.
You've heard from the major party candidates for governor, but there is another name on the ballot. Tune into CT'22 this Sunday at 8:30 a.m. for our conversation with Rob Hoteling, who is running for governor on the independent party ticket. That is our CT'22 CT Insider Primetime Special. Thank you for watching. We're back with that brand new CT'22. We'll be back in Studio A on Sunday morning. We hope you'll join us. Good night.